Damage per minute is one of the most important values in the game. I'm not going to sit here and say that it isn't. But what I will say is that it's also not the end-all and be-all of a vehicle. I remember when the Kron was first released into World of Tanks Blitz, and there were so many people saying, oh, the Kron's not a good tank because it doesn't feature a lot of damage per minute. And I was like, what are you smoking? The Kron is one of the best tier 10s in the game. You sit hull down, nothing can pen you, and you deal 1200 damage in return. And I still think that's the same case for the Kron. It is easily one of the most effective tier 10s in the game if you know how to play it properly. And then you arrive to a vehicle like a Leopard, which is also incredible. Features the highest level of damage per minute in tier 10, has great mobility, solid gun depression, yet it's the second worst performing tier 10 in the game, only behind the Grill. So why is the Leopard such a bad performer? Well, it's simple. It's a tricky tank to play. It has no armor, and no armor means if you don't have skill, you're probably going to get bled and punished heavily for making aggressive plays. Where if you were to drive something like an E50M with much more armor and pushing potential, you can get away with being a lot more aggressive. It's a great example to showcase how damage per minute, sure, it's great. I mean, I have super good stats in the Leopard. 3,700 average damage, 86% win rate for 30 games. It's a great way to showcase that you can get a lot of damage out in this tank. But at the same time, you need a lot of skill to do that. Damage per minute is definitely a skill-based statistic. But as I said, it's not the end-all be-all, and I am quite confident in saying that tanks that feature low DPM but really good armor or other characteristics are just as good, if not better, than high DPM tanks. A great example of this is the newly released Semovente Contra Caro 64 Vipera. This Tier 8 Italian collector tank destroyer, by many people, is considered a worse version of the tech tree. I mean, why wouldn't you consider it a worse version? The tech tree has more armor, it has more damage per shot, and it has more DPM. But that doesn't mean it's a flat better tank. The mobility on traverse speed, the gun arc on this tank is better, the overall acceleration and power to weight on the Vipera is better, and it features a 2-shot auto reloader. And trust me, the 2-shot auto reloader on this tank, in my opinion, makes it much better than the tech tree. I didn't actually know how to originally state my opinions on this vehicle with my first video, because I just played the tank, played 3 games in it, and shared my opinions. And you'll notice throughout the video, I started off originally saying, it's just looks kind of mid, and then at the end of the video, I was like, wow, this thing's actually really impressive. And I still think that's the case. Making our way over to just some of the games I played on stream today, we arrived to Oasis Palms. And this battle is going to showcase just how effective and capable a vehicle like the Vipera can be when you use it properly. See, there's a lot of players out there which mistakenly believe that you should only use your reserve shell in a time of need. And don't get me wrong, that's not an incorrect thought process. If you're in a situation where there's 2 tanks rushing you, which you're actually going to see in this battle, this game's a great example of when you can dump your reserve shell and when you can't. But this is going to be a great example because we're going to have 2 different situations. The first situation we're going to run into is where I have to use the most DPM possible to fight 2 separate tanks, kill both of them, and then use my reserve shell when only necessary. But then you're going to see a later situation develop in this game where I dump my reserve shell multiple times for free. And it is a good example of where you do not need to only use your reserve shell when you are, forced to, when you're in a situation where there's a tank that's gonna kill you and you need that final shell to push him out of the game and then continue playing. Personally, I actually think dumping the second shell can give you a lot of advantages, especially if you are with a team that is holding pretty well. But we'll explain that as the game goes through. So obviously, I could have shot that WZ-120 there and been able to deal 800 HP to him if I wanted to. But I didn't think it was worth it, and I think that was the right play, because we obviously... Ooh, no, we're not able to. I could have, I guess, snapped the shell there, but I was a little worried that something might roll behind me like the TS5, and I didn't know exactly what was going on at the beginning of this game, so I didn't dump my shell. I'm playing a little safe right now. We get a shell into the enemy WZ-120, and he kills my ISU. You'll notice that I do have a little bit of support of an RU-251, but he's not going to be too much support for long. We get a shell into the WZ, and again, I have that reserve shell. Could have shot it into the WZ, but I'm not going to. There's no reason to dump my shells right now when I can play this game a lot smarter. So I'm going to shoot the WZ. He is now a one-shot. We're going to reload. WZ-120 is going to push me, and obviously I don't want to get shot by both of these tanks. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the shell from the tank destroyer. We're going to use him as cover from the medium, clear the medium, and then this is where that reserve shell comes in handy. I'm able to clear the WZ. Pretty good stuff. We've dealt 2,000 damage in a short period of this game. We did bleed about 2/3 of our health, but it was mandatory. We had to do what we're forced to do in that game. We had to dump our reserve. We had to play it exactly right. Because if I made a mistake and I dumped my shell in the wrong time or I bounced a shot, my game could have very quickly ended. But this is where we swap gears. And now we're going to be in a situation where I have free farm on the enemy. So we start off by getting an easy shell into the enemy object 452K. And I was like, I could shoot him, but I'm not going to. We're just going to move up a little bit. I'm going to get on this ridge line in front of me and see if we can get some good old snapperoonies into maybe the Sama, the 452, if somebody drives out in the open. So we can see that the 452 is doing that. We're going to aim in a little bit, and we're going to get one shell into his tank for 417, and two shells for another 409. That's 830 damage. And notice how I have no resentment or guilt whatsoever of shooting that reserve shell. There's a lot of skilled players out there who would say, oh, never shoot your reserve shell there. That's not an emergency. But I am playing the smart, and I'm calculating how much time it's going to take me to get to the enemy. At this point, I have my shell already loaded, and that's about how much time it took me to drive to the front line. Yes, you could make the argument I could have stayed in the back, and I could have farmed the IS-3 or whatever at distance, but there's no reason to do that when I can push in and help my team, which right now is in a bit of a problem situation. There's a full health Sama, and nobody wants to get clipped by a full health Sama, especially not me. So I see that he's shooting at somebody else, so he's obviously on reload. So we're going to go one, we're going to go two again. This is a situation where a lot of people might say, oh, why would you dump your reserve shell? Well, there's two very simple reasons why. First of all, I only have 500 health. And if I want to sit there and I want to use my effective DPM, I might be giving that IS-3 the ability to shoot me, and then also give that Sama the ability to just push me and kill me. I don't want that to happen. I'd much rather just dump my damage back in the cover, reload, and then push back out once again. And that's what we're doing here. So we got the Sama, we're going to aim it on his hatch. Okay. Classic and accurate gun moment there, but we still are doing fine. We're hull down. The Sama missed his shots anyway. He's got a damaged loader or gunner, whatever you want to call it. We shoot him once, try to track him, but we don't. Doesn't matter, though. We are at 4,800 damage. I shoot my reserve shell into the IS-3 again, not worrying about my DPM. This is a great example of how even a tank that doesn't feature incredible levels of damage per minute, even in a situation where I dumped my reserve shell many times, only having around 1,200 effective DPM, it did not matter, because I was still able to deal over 5,200 damage in this game. If you think of it very simply, right? You have 7 minutes in a game to deal damage. And if you were to average only 1,000 DPM in those 7 minutes, you would still deal 7,000 at the end of the game. Now, judging that a lot of people, probably even watching the video, have never achieved 7,000 damage, it's a good example of how DPM really doesn't dictate how much you are able to put out in a battle. Yes, if you are driving a Leopard 1, you could technically deal 8,000 damage in 2 minutes of shooting. But I don't see people pulling 8Ks out left and right in the Leopard 1. So clearly that's not the case. And, this was just an easy game right here. 5,200 damage, incredibly solid victory. And, by the way, that was not the only game I ended up dumping my reserve shell just because I felt like it. There were, at least 90% of the games I played, situations where I fired 2 shots into an opponent just because I wanted to punish them for poking, and they were in a possibly dangerous tank. And I can tell you, out of those games I did it, I got benefited every single one, got rewarded every single one. Taking a look at my average damage in the vehicle, I have 24 games with 3,200. That's pretty dang solid, and it's not like my win rate suffered either. 75% solo, especially in a tank destroyer, is pretty dang solid if you ask me. So I'm averaging more damage than even some of the top players. I went on to Blitz Stars during my stream and looked at the highest average damage players on the NA server in tier 10, and they were sitting, 20th place was sitting at around 3,200 average. So in this tier 8, I'm going the same average damage as the 20th best player in NA in tier 10. That just shows you how easy it is to use and abuse this reserve shell mechanic to your favor. So yeah, I might only have 1,200 effective DPM when I do it, but I can tell you for a fact that if you play the game right, you can get out some really solid wins. So this is a battle from the live stream. I forgot to turn on my replays from 10 to 100, which is a little bit unfortunate. So because I changed that, I have to actually show the battle from the stream, but thankfully I still have the footage. So this game we are on Alpenstadt. This was actually one of the first games I played on live stream. It's a solid matchup. We got tier 8s and tier 7s up against us, and I am going to just make my way throughout the town. And you are going to watch me from start to finish on this battle dump my reserve shell multiple times and literally never get punished. And not only that, but deal a pretty solid amount of damage. So starting off, we have the Yag Panther, and we're going to aim in. There's one shell for 389, two shells 398. That is 787 damage, and we have brought what was a full health tank down to 263 hit points. That's insane when you think about it. We have literally crippled his battle for the rest of the game. And that is why dumping your reserve shell sometimes can be really beneficial. I have taken that tank out of the game for the rest of the battle. I mean, that's it. He cannot poke anymore or he dies from every tank on my team. And we have an ISU. And he's going to shoot at me and misses. There's 376 and 761. There you go. Now the ISU for the rest of the game is a one-shot for any 400 alpha tank on my team. I have ruined his battle as well. So just like that, I have been able to ruin two separate players' games instantly. And I'm still sitting at around 1600 damage. That's pretty good. Again, it's not like I'm struggling to get out damage. In the first 2 minutes of battle, I've done 1600 damage. That means if I were to go another 2 minutes, I'm easily sitting at 3000. So look at that. A Carnarvon, 1, 2. There you go. Now we are at 2400 damage dealt. It's been 2 minutes now in the game. Exactly 2 minutes. And I've dealt 2400 damage. There's no way that somebody can tell me getting out damage is tricky if you have low DPM. It just isn't. It's not the case. The reason I was able to dump my reserve shell so effortlessly in this battle is because I knew that my team wasn't falling apart. Obviously, if you're in a losing battle where your team from the start of the game is falling apart, they're dying, you're not going to want to lose your effective DPM. Because if you do, when you're getting pushed, you're going to wish you had it. But if you're in a situation like the one I'm in here, where you know that, oh, well, we're winning this quite easily, why even worry about dumping your reserve shell? There's no penalty for it, really. The only penalty is you have to wait a bit longer, but the reward is I get to completely knock two tanks out of the game. Now, this is a great example of where I'm not dumping the reserve, because the Chimera has a decent amount of health. But now that I've lowered him down to about 840, I don't mind at all dumping it. So we're just going to reload, and there is 1, and we're going to reload 1 more shell, 2. There you go. We have brought what was a full health Chimera down to 76 health, and my Dracula is going to clear him. We did not get punished whatsoever in this battle once for dumping the reserve shell. It did not affect how much DPM we really had. In fact, I think dumping the reserve gave me more effective damage per minute output. We did 3,800 damage in this game, and we just steamrolled all the way through, start to finish. It's crazy just how easy you can get out damage when you are able to take advantage of the reserve shell. And personally, I just don't see much of a reason why you wouldn't want to do that. Now, I'm not saying that in every game you play, that you should just throw your reserve shells away willy-nilly. But I also think that if you are in a situation where you can nuke an enemy tank back into cover and reload with no repercussions, why wouldn't you? I just drive it like an M6 Yo. You know, a lot of people like the DPM gun on the M6 Yo. I am a firm believer that the double shot is the way to go due to the fact it can annihilate something in front of you, back into cover, and reload. That's the same thing I do with the Semovente Contra Caro. So I think that this tank is incredibly strong. I actually do better in it than I do the Tech Tree. The Tech Tree, I have 2,910 average damage with an 86%. And this tank, as we said, I have 3,200 average damage. So while there are a lot of Debbie Downers out there who are going to say, oh, blah, blah, blah this, oh, blah, blah, blah that, personally, I think that the reserve shell mechanic on this tank allows it to be incredibly dangerous, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can completely ruin your game. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.